As you know, this is Measure of an Episode. Our continuing mission is to explore what makes a Star Trek episode a good Star Trek episode and not just good TV. Or in this case, bad TV. Really bad TV. Last time...
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I loved this episode.
Really? Well, we have a lot to talk about. So what were we supposed to watch?
The Search, Part 1 and Part 2, with Odo and Kira getting on the love ship.
No, that's Part 2. Part 1 is, well, almost as shitty as Part 2, but not quite. Okay, so let me read the blurbs. We did the blurbs last time. Here's the blurb. Right. Part 1. Preparing for possible invasion by the Jem'Hadar, Kira determines that Deep Space Nine lacks the firepower to defend itself, which only encompasses about the first 3.5 minutes of the episode. Like,
right, the cold open.
Is not about that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Part 2. Odo and Kira have landed on a lone... Oop, I didn't write it down. On a lone planet? I just have lone. Odo and Kira have landed on a lone in the Amurian Nebula, which they have discovered is Odo's home world, which is a huge, like, I guess that's not a, that's kind of a spoiler. That they just
that happens in the cold open as well. Like, on the second, in Part 2, the first episode ends with that, the being open.
That's true.
Like, and she's like, welcome home, or whatever. So, yeah.
Okay, so I should tell everybody, I do not remember any of this show. I know that I've watched it at one point probably in high school, but I have no memory of any of this stuff. And I'm skipping all the recaps, because especially this one, because this was a season opener.
Right.
Because I want to see if I want to analyze every episode in as much of its own bubble as possible.
Actually, let's go ahead and set it up where I watch the recaps and you don't. I didn't think the recap was necessary for this episode, for Part 1 in particular.
Well, I was wondering where Cisco was, and then he shows up, obviously, for the big reveal. Okay, so we need to talk about this. Let's talk about this sort of as a general, like, so you liked this whatever this was?
I didn't see it as 1 2-hour-long episode. That is not how it viewed to me. It viewed as everything was set up in the first part, almost like it was all just exposition that we needed to know, and it needed to be fleshed out like that. And then the second one was where all the action took place. Because the first one, there wasn't a sci-fi problem at all. Like, the problem was negotiating with the new species or culture, and I feel like that's not a sci-fi issue.
Yeah, I mean, the only moment where I was like, okay, this is Star Trek, was when they're in the Defiant cloaked and they're being tracked by those two Jem'Hadar ships, and there was legitimate tension there where they had a problem, they solved it with some techno stuff, and it was easy to understand. And I felt like that was a cool moment.
Right.
Other than that, I don't think it ever happens in both parts where it felt like Star Trek to me. It just felt like a political, thinly veiled statement on racism almost. Like it did not feel like Star Trek to me at all. Did it to you?
The much bigger premise of DS9, it is trying to show like the cracks in the Federation and what you have to do to maintain peace.
Let's kind of baby step through what happens. So,
okay.
Starts off, there's going to be a Jem'Hadar invasion of some kind, right? And they're like, we can't possibly win unless we destroy the wormhole. And that's an option. But that's not an option that Kira wants. And so Cisco shows up magically with this new ship that isn't designed to help them defeat an invasion, but he wants to take it and talk to the founders. The founders. And so they're like, this seems like a bad idea. And they're like, well, that's the only idea. And it's like, okay, well, let's go do it. I guess they don't know where to go.
Right.
It seems like it's like a mystery plot for the first episode in a way.
Quark has already made some negotiations with another species on the Gamma Quadrant, Delta Quadrant,
right?
Wherever there.
Can we talk just as an aside what a stupid name Quark is? It's so dumb. It's so like 50s sci-fi.
Well,
it's
in
like
Ferengi, it means handsome.
Yeah, but it's also like the name of a stellar object. It's like if it was Lieutenant Commander Nebula and Captain Supernova, right? It's like you couldn't come up with a better name than Quark. Anyway, sorry. So the first bit of actual tension happens when they beam Dax and
O'Brien,
Irish guy O'Brien,
Colmeany,
and a super lame set for like an alien set,
right?
Complete with the Tesla coil in the background,
Yeah. So I will say that I know that it was kind of leading into it, but the camera work when Dax and O'Brien were working on it, I was like, it's being held like there's somebody watching them, and then they got attacked, and I was, oh, it's because it is.
Yeah. Now, I was going to say, do you remember if the first one was directed by the first part was directed by Jonathan Frakes? Because the second part is.
Oh no, I didn't. I actually went back to see who wrote it, but I didn't look to see who directed it.
This is where it starts to feel really weird, and maybe that's on purpose, right? Because the Defiant gets attacked, and then Dax and O'Brien are attacked on the planet in this weird control room that's 4 feet by 4 feet.
Right.
But that's like a storage room they put everything into.
Right. Oh, totally.
They kept it plugged in. Yeah.
Well, but the other thing too is it was unmanned, so it wasn't designed to hold people in it. So I was willing to concede the space for it, given the fact that it wasn't supposed to have lots of people there.
Okay, all right. I'll say then. Why did it have lights? But anyway, we don't need to talk about that.
So I do want to say about the first episode, the B plot, because the A plot was about getting over to the other quadrant and trying to find the founders. The B plot was Odo's story, but it felt very much like he wasn't a part of the story. Everyone was like, what's going on with Odo? Is Odo okay? Should we talk to Odo?
And he's always supposed to be kind of cantankerous.
Right.
But he was super cantankerous. The scene with him on the Defiant with Odo.
With Quark?
Where with Odo and Quark. It was so overly acted. He's just yelling at him. And I mean, the only person the only two actors who I felt like were just sort of acting naturally in this whole episode were Quark and Garrick. They just felt like regular people talking to people. Everybody else is super earnest and they're yelling all the time.
I remember Odo being much crankier in this episode. And I think this might have been me projecting, but I think it was a specific direction because he was now so much closer to his home planet. He was super irritated that like there was this thing calling to him and he didn't know, like it was weighing on his mind and he didn't know why or what it was.
Right. He's like on edge or something like that.
Yeah. Like, because the same thing, like when he sees the nebula, like he just suddenly completely mellows out and gets like just absorbed into just that location on the map.
They needed Odo obviously for what happens later in the plot. But they don't integrate him at all. He's just sort of just cranky and pissed off that he got fired. And the reason that he got fired, it was unclear because it's like, oh, they don't trust him. He's not a team player. But yet he was doing just fine for 2 years. Like, why don't they trust him after 2 years?
For the last 2 seasons, they've been tolerating him because, like what Cisco said, that he's not a team player. He doesn't. He gets the job done, but he doesn't do it by the Federation rules. And so, it was kind of one of those things where we appreciate what you're doing, but we really wish you'd follow the rules. And then now that they brought the Defiant on and the Romulan security guard or whoever she was, like they were basically saying, we need someone that we know is going to follow Federation protocol, and we don't know you're going to do that.
Right. Okay. All right. Fine.
Cisco and Bashir are on an escape pod on a shuttle. They were badly damaged.
And he's sort of saying like we only have 20% life left, and we're kind of adrift or something, or our engines are going to fail soon. And then like I don't know if I accidentally fell asleep, but didn't magically the rear like did they get tractor beamed or something like that, and then just the back door opens and they're on Deep Space Nine?
Oh no, they weren't just magically on Deep Space Nine. Their external sensors were out, so they couldn't see anything that was happening outside of the shuttle. They didn't know what was going on, and then suddenly a tractor beam hit them, or they assumed it was a tractor beam. And then the back doors open, and it was O'Brien and Dax. And they were like, "We thought you were dead," and they're like, "No, we." I forget what they said about like if it was the Jem'Hadar or if it was somebody else, and they managed to escape, but. They came from DS9 with a search ship, found them, and they were taking them back.
Okay. All right. I must have accidentally looked at my phone and then looked up and they were back on Deep Space Nine. Is this the point where we're introduced to the swarmy new security chief guy?
Yeah.
I don't remember when that guy comes in.
No, he was introduced in the previous episode, but he was introduced when Odo was relieved of command. But I don't think he did anything for the rest of the episode.
No, he doesn't come back until the middle of the second part.
Right.
And it's weird because they set him up as being kind of this, like he's kind of hitting on Kira a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, there's going to be some sort of tension here. And actually, I know that at a certain point they get together, Odo and Kira, but I don't know if it's happened and they've broken up or if it hasn't happened yet. But it's weird because they're written so vaguely in that way. Like she's being super supportive, maybe a little bit too supportive for somebody who is just a colleague.
Right. They have not hooked up yet. He has not told. I don't think he tells her until like season 5 or something. It's a long time.
I was expecting there to be some sort of jealousy on Odo's part when the guy starts hitting on Kira, which never comes back. I guess because she leaves, so he can't hit on her anymore. He does
make it a little difficult. Yeah.
So there's a moment where Sisko and Dax have a scene together.
Okay.
They're doing something. There's like this sexual tension there where they're looking at each other weird. And I know that they're supposed to have known each other when she was in a different form of some kind. It always feels like they're having sex, and but they don't talk about it like they have some sort of unspoken rule. So it makes their sex life more interesting when they have sex. Everything that they said to each other seems to be soaked in sexual tension. Did you not get that?
No, no.
Oh, come on.
No,
it's like,
but again,
like when they look at it, like they're kind of smirking, and it's like it's kind of flirty, but we're already having sex kind of flirty, not in a pre-sex flirty.
Right. But again, I'm watching it, I guess with a slightly different tint because I know that she used to be an old man. Like Sisko calls her old man all the time. And so like I am viewing their dialogue from that angle. And so like even if the sexual tension is there, I don't think I would have noticed it until you brought it up because I'm not watching for it.
Although I have to ask, so let's say this Dax is real, and you know that this Dax used to be an old man that you knew. Would you be attracted to her? She's a very pretty lady.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, we, as an old dude, we probably would have had some bar conversations about some girls that we were with. And I was bound to say, she did this amazing thing or she did this thing and it like totally threw me off. And so if in this new body, like she was down to clown, I would totally be all over that. Like spots on a Dax. Because somewhere in the recesses of that old man brain, like she would know some of the things that I'm into.
That I wouldn't even, my brain wouldn't even go that far. Just be like, pretty lady, the gears are turning.
Right. I don't think I would push it ever because
but you're open to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the scenes, it was I'm sorry you didn't like this episode because the only thing that threw me off was when Kira goes to that like open area and she's like, Odo, is that you? Are you a tree? And then knowing that she's on a planet of changelings and they can all turn into anything, she then begins to tell him her plans of how she's going to like go investigate this thing and try to find out what it is.
I don't think Kira has enough information to automatically assume that they wouldn't want her to do that.
But they told her not to make any contact with the outside, like to not communicate with anybody while on the planet.
Right, but that's not researching a door. Had she found the door at this point, or was
she
just
found the door and she was no,
okay.
I don't think she found the door, but she did know that there was a power source coming from beneath the planet's surface.
So I don't think that they would have. I mean, I don't think that she would think, "Oh, they're not going to like this. We have to keep this a secret." Right? Okay, let's jump ahead for a second so we can talk about this.
Okay.
So the whole thing of this episode, the whole conceit is that all of part 2 and some of part 1 are all taking place in the heads of the people who were captured.
None of part 1.
None of part 1.
Right.
Oh, so they're captured, and then part 2 happens, and then so all of part 2 is them. They are captured and hooked up to an Inception machine where they're sharing each other's.
Right.
And so that's why why it gets weird. And I was wondering to myself, okay, is this, when I was watching it, is this one of those episodes where not everything is as it seems? And I probably wasn't in tune enough to the show. I mean, were you ever feeling like, oh, this is not right. Something is bad. Something is going wrong.
No, because I feel like I remember them actually, like the wormhole stopping at some point, and they were trying to figure out why it went down, or They were trying to figure out how to bring it back. And so I thought this was the episode that shut the wormhole down. And so I was totally riveted, and I did not see the twist coming.
I mean, I didn't either, but it did feel like it could have been that, but there weren't enough nods to it.
The thing that I felt made me go, okay, that explains it. Like, that makes a lot more sense, was because the tension and like the obstacles were getting more and more intense. Like they were not, there wasn't one issue that they were trying to deal with, which is usually what happens on an episode. Like the tension was getting super high on DS9. The peace treaty was going through without the Romulans. The peace treaty was then signed. Like, Sisko and that entire team were putting their careers on the line. They then had, I think the Jem'Hadar were going after them, which started to go after them. So, like, other than all of these obstacles building, I was like, how are they going to finish this by the end of the episode?
So you didn't feel like it was sort of stiltedly written? It just didn't feel like everything they were saying was like on the nose, and maybe it was the act. Maybe I'm just not used to it, and maybe I just need to get used to DS9.
Well, yeah, because I actually felt the opposite. I felt that the conversations were a lot more flowing and natural than they were on Voyager.
Well, no, I'm not saying Voyager was better.
Okay, but I totally empathized with Sisko's confusion and frustration with the peace treaty going on. And who else? I felt Kira was a little not stilted, but a little too understanding for everything that had just happened.
I felt that about everybody. When they all wake up and they're just in this room, wouldn't you be furious? I mean,
at the end of it?
Basically, yeah, like they basically kidnapped these people, put them into a simulation to see what would happen. And then at the end of it, they're like, one to beam up. Don't do that again, though. It was weird. It was just that. And then who was in the Defiant waiting for them to be like what?
Yeah.
Who was waiting for them?
Right. Yeah. The first 5 to go up, I was like, wait, are they literally calling the Defiant and saying, beam me up? Is that a thing you can do?
I mean, I thought I could explain it away myself, and that like, oh, maybe the computer knows Sisko's voice, and so it knows to beam them up automatically.
But yeah, I mean, he does say Sisko to Defiant, and I was like, who's going to respond to that?
Yeah.
Like,
and who was standing by idly while his captain or their whatever commander was being operated on or whatever.
Right. Yeah, so that was the big question for me as far as like, Star Trek problems and continuity. To the baseline though, I was actually, the resolution I thought was, that it was all a dream and they were just inceptioned. But the resolution to the episode actually was a non-sci-fi resolution, which was the ethics discussion with the changelings. And she was like, no changeling will ever harm another changeling, so we're going to let you go. So it was a stalemate between two individuals rather than, a sci-fi hand wave or an actual resolution. So between the two episodes, between our two podcasts so far, having careers on the line was way more tense than worrying they were going to die, like in the Voyager episode.
Both of the episodes, the two that we've done so far, the Swarm and the two episodes of the Search.
Yeah.
All 3 of these episodes, all are sort of on par writing wise, and like it just felt very. I know where I have to get where I have to go, I know where I have to get in terms of narratively, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to creatively get there. I'm just going to get there. It just didn't have a lot of finesse to me. There's a line that totally stuck out to me. It's when Garrick says, we have an old Kardashian saying, enemies make dangerous friends. And that's just one of those things that somebody writes down that kind of sounds deep, but is like it's like a no shit that, yeah, of course, that's not something that like, oh yeah, you're right. I never thought of it that way. It's like saying, never brush your teeth with a cat. It just felt like bad writing. It didn't impart any kind of like, oh, that's a good point. Like it wasn't wise. It was supposed to be this wise saying, and it wasn't. That kind of encapsulates the whole episode for me.
I wonder if I like these characters more, or if I think like the actors are better than the ones in Voyager, because you saw these two episodes on parallel with each other, and I thought they were polar opposites. I thought this one was much like I cared about the characters. I was following along with the dialogue. I feel like this one didn't have a sci-fi problem. I think it was still a sci-fi setting.
Well, at the end of the episode, we find out that it's this weird simulacrum, I guess. But we don't know that until the end.
Even there, that wasn't the problem. That was just that was how the problems were being presented,
right?
Rather than the actual the problem wasn't that they were in the mind simulation. The problem was what was happening in the mind simulation.
Right, which kind of cheapens it in a way, because you get to the end and you're like, oh, we're starting back at the beginning now. Like we got to the end of part 2 and nothing that happened actually happened. It's the same thing as waking up like at the end of an episode and it was all a dream.
Not entirely, because they did find out who the founders were, and the Dominion and the founders learned that the Alpha Quadrant would not bow down so willingly.
But did they really think that they would? I mean, I understand that that's why they were running the simulation, but they had to go through this huge deal to kidnap them to run this simulation. So clearly they knew that it was going to be kind of hard, right? It's the Federation. As far as I can tell, the Federation is like the biggest organization in space that we know of.
Yes, but it's
right?
the biggest organization in the Alpha Quadrant. This quadrant that they're in, I can't remember if it's the Gamma or the Delta because of Voyager. But so all they know is there's this single tiny ship with lots of guns, and so they took this crew and they put them in this simulation to see, you may are you big because you concede on everything and you're just you just kind of want to be the head person, but you're not actually doing anything? Or are you actually disciplined and moral, and you're able to, the negotiations are literal negotiations and not just you giving everything away?
I can see your point. I just feel like that's not a huge revelation to dedicate an entire 2-parter to, right? To get to the end of it, and that's the information that was gained. One thing that hit me about this episode was that you could probably just listen to it and you wouldn't miss anything. I bet I could have watched this without watching it, and it would have been fine.
I don't know about DS9 specifically. I'm thinking of a TNG episode where you had to be watching, the one where they were just with visual cues telling everybody to put the 2 intruders on the bridge into a personalized. So this overall was kind of just a mediocre episode in general. It doesn't fall under, so far, it doesn't fall under our Star Trek criteria of having a sci-fi problem with a non-sci-fi resolution. We had a non-sci-fi resolution, but everything about this episode was kind of just non-sci-fi in general.
Yeah, it was just a political episode.
Yeah.
I would definitely say not a good Star Trek episode.
Yeah.
That's my vote.
And I would agree with that. I thought it was a great episode. Obviously, you and I disagree on that, but I thought it was a great episode. But based on what we figured out, and honestly, now remembering that DS9 is kind of a serial political show, we may have to adjust what our criteria is for a Star Trek episode. Otherwise, almost none of DS9 will be a Star Trek episode. DS9 ran with the Gene Roddenberry concept of it being thinly veiled political issues. And they almost completely took out the sci-fi problem aspect of it because they ran with the political side. Which also made me think of the episode, which is considered like one of the seminal Star Trek original series episodes, where there's 2 alien races that cannot get along because they have opposing black and white faces. If we are doing the slight comparison of 2 different cultures versus 2 different alien races, therefore it's not really a sci-fi issue, then that episode wouldn't be considered a Star Trek episode because that's not a sci-fi problem.
I think for this episode, the biggest offense in terms of it not being a Star Trek episode is the science fiction aspect of the whole plot line, which is just revealed at the end. doesn't really play into the episode except as a resolution, except as a step away from the plot, right? In terms of the other stuff, there's a non-sci-fi resolution, which is sort of the political Odo aspect. But because they didn't really nod to the whole simulation thing, it just kind of happens at the end. I felt like it could have just been they could have been asleep. It could have been anything, right? There was no the whole hard science fiction aspect of it didn't play into the plot at all. I mean, it was just it's actually pretty actiony for a Star Trek episode.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, and I that's what I was saying about how like the tension just kept mounting. You know, there was problem after problem, and they kept trying to figure, they just kept building on each other rather than being a problem with a solution and then a problem with the solution. Which is just very not Star Trek-y.
It didn't feel like there was ever that where they would reconnoiter and like have some sort of plan that they would execute that had to do with something with science fiction. You know what I mean? There wasn't that sort of science fiction procedural aspect of them trying to accomplish their goal.
Right.
It's just them going from point A to point B to get to the end of the episode, basically.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was just what you said. It was very actiony for that reason. Like they never had a chance to debrief and try to come up with a solution other than the time where they clearly did. That was never shown on camera.
It was sort of the Ocean's 11 type of thing where they came up with the plan, but the audience doesn't know it.
Right.
And we just get to watch them execute the plan, which is outman and outgun a race of military beings. Right? Like, in my mind, Kira, Odo, and any of them should stand absolutely no chance against any of these, the Jem'Hadar. Zero chance. It's sort of the same thing as when they're up against the Klingon, right?
Right.
These people have been training to kick people's ass since they were children, right?
Right.
And you've had I'm sure you've had some Starfleet training, to do the open-handed punch.
Well, and the two-fisted punch.
There's no way
any
of these people are going to defeat these super huge, like, military badasses. But all of them get dispatched almost immediately.
I think there would be a couple blows just to throw them off, but
yeah, maybe they get a few. It's like it's the same thing as Daniel-san and Johnny in not Back to the Future,
Karate Kid.
The Karate Kid. There's no way. There's in no universe does Daniel ever beat Johnny. Zero chance.
Well,
right?
unless he gets that lucky illegal shot in. Because they specifically say no kicks to the face.
Right. But he does. And it should knock him out and kick all his teeth out. But there's no way he would even get to that moment. There's he's been learning karate for 3 months versus Johnny, who has made it it's his hobby. That's what he does. He's been going probably since he was 10 years old, maybe earlier. And he can obviously whoop ass. Same thing.
Yeah.
There's no way. There's no reason. Anyway, I digress.
Very much so.
So we're in agreement. Not a good Star Trek episode. Does not meet our criteria at all.
Yeah.
Maybe a little, but not enough.
Right, not enough. There you go. That's a good way to put it. I thought it was a great episode. I'm sorry you didn't like it. Maybe it's just because I have such a bad taste in my mouth from the first one.
Well, we're just going to have to agree that you're wrong.
Okay, we'll compromise. All right. Okay. So what's next?
TNG 703.
703?
We got what we wanted. It's called The Interface. Originally aired in October 4th, 1993.
Okay.
So let's get to the, what do you call it? The blurb.
LaForge is distracted by the news of his missing mother while he uses a new remote probe technology to search for a downed spacecraft.
Okay.
I totally remember this one.
It rings absolutely no bells.
No? Oh.
None.
Okay, well.
Season 7 is always kind of fuzzy for me.
Well, and Season 7 was definitely hit and miss. This was a miss.
Do you remember a lot of it?
No. I remember I remember when it aired. What was its first air date?
October 4th, 1993.
Okay. So yeah, I was in middle school. I remember when it first aired being bored with it. It was not holding my attention enough to stay focused on it. And I think it's because it was a little bit too character focused. And the issue and the drama with it was just not. It wasn't interesting enough. Yeah,
LaForge. I mean, it sounds like it's LaForge centered based on the blurb.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever really liked a LaForge centered episode unless they're doing something mean to him. Then it's fun. But when it's just him falling in love with a hologram, I don't care.
Oh, see, that was the example I was going to give. Like, what about that episode? No, you didn't care? I really liked that episode.
Oh, really? Yeah. Maybe I'll like it when I watch it again in 12 and a half years when it pops up.
Right. Well, and here's the thing, too. The people always talk about how you should start with season 3 and start with season 3 in The Next Generation because the first 2 seasons are terrible. But season 3 is almost nothing but callbacks to the first 2 seasons. And so I'm pretty sure that episode is in the first 2 seasons. And in the 3rd season, he meets that holographic person.
Right. And she gets pissed, right, or something, because she finds out that he's got a blow-up doll of her, or the science fiction version of a blow-up doll of her.
Yeah. So it's just amazing. Like, the first 2 seasons, yes, they're not that great, but they make the season 3 so much better because, like, if you watch the first 2 seasons, you know all of the references they're making in season 3.
Also, what kind of asshole do you have to be to know that, okay, I know I want to see this huge show that had a huge influence on culture, on television, on science fiction, on everything. But you're like, but I'm going to skip the first 2. Yes, I mean, after having seen it, it's easy to say, they're not that good. But you can only say that after having seen it. So, like, the idea that even if I would never follow that recommendation. If somebody said, you shouldn't watch the first 2 seasons of Buffy because they're terrible, I'm not going to not watch the first 2 seasons of Buffy.
Right. If you're watching Buffy, you're watching Buffy. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a weird... It's a weird recommendation to make. It also is kind of shitty because you're saying you're setting them up to not like it,
right?
Because they're going to go in with a predefined opinion of it.
Yeah.
Don't do that to me anymore.
All right. Well, let's go watch it and see what happens.